All right, so I think we can get started.
All right, that's my cue then to get started. Welcome everyone to the Western Mass Historical Commission Coalition meeting. For those of you who have not come to one of these in the past, or this it's been a while, we try to do these three times, maybe four if we're lucky, a year. And it's really a place for members of historical commissions, but also anybody who's interested in the particular topic to come and hear some cool information and good speakers, and then also kind of share some thoughts about what's going on in the field. We put these on. This is the Western Mass version. Evidently, I've been told there is an Eastern Mass version that likes to copy us. So hopefully, we put on a good show today. The three RPAs, the regional planning agencies out here, along with our assistants from Preservation Mass and Mass Historic, help put these on. Beth Giannini from Franklin Regional Council of Governments, Shannon Walsh from the Pioneer Valley Planning Commission, Laura Brennan, who I don't believe is on here today, was unable to make it, from Berkshire Regional Planning Commission, Robin Fordham from Mass Historic, and Stacia Kaplanson from Preservation Mass, all helped to kind of coordinate this and put these together. And my name is Ted Harvey. I'm with the Franklin Regional Council of Governments. So as you can see, the topic today is how to jumpstart your community's inventory of historic resources. We have a number of folks who are speaking, many of the folks I just actually mentioned, along with Anna Bugnola from Greenfield, who's the library director in Greenfield. So she will be speaking on basically how to use the library, your public library. So we'll get started, and Beth is going to kick us off with the basics.
Thank you, Ted. As Ted said, my name is Beth Giannini, and I work at the Franklin Regional Council of Governments. When we were kind of the steering committee, the folks who Ted just mentioned, who get together and kind of plan out these workshops, we were trying to think of something that we're always trying to think of something useful that would be helpful for the local historical commissions and historic societies, and we came to talking about the inventory forms, mass historic inventory forms for historic resources, and we just thought that this would make a great topic because it's really is kind of the basics of local historic preservation. And so I am tasked with just talking about like trying to get you started by saying why you need to fill these out at a very basic level. And this on the screen is one. I just randomly went onto the Macris website and pulled a inventory form for Greenfield. It's one that wasn't necessarily filled out like super recently. But they're all end up scanned and posted on the Mass Historic website. So they're really, really helpful. As far as kind of convincing you that these are really important, they're really the basis for if you go to Mass Historic and you're wanting to nominate a building or create a district, first thing they're gonna look at is if you have inventory forms. So on like a kind of a process basis or a reason for doing it, they are a prerequisite for the National Register nomination process. So that's kind of the first thing that they'll look at. I know that I worked on a National Register district in Montague for Millers Falls, and the first thing that Mass Historic did was they went and looked at the area form that had already been that was posted, but it was older, so we had to update it first and then reviewed whether that process could move forward. So it really is kind of a basic step. And that's important. But there's also lots of other reasons to fill out inventory forms before you get to that point where you are going to Mass Historic. And really, it's just a really great basic way of documenting historic resources in the town, particularly if there's an interest in it and there's a group of motivated volunteers or people willing to work on it. Because a lot of times that history is something that is, is can be carried forward if it's written down. And sometimes I know when my experiences have been that folks will chat about it or talk about it, or there's one person in town who has some family history and they know about a particular building. So it really is a basic step and a really great way to document the historic resources in town. Um, it also provides information for local planning, for working on comprehensive plans, working on lots of other documents. The Mass Historic's website that has all of the inventory forms, the Macris website, and also the Macris Maps website is, I know as a planner, it's a really great resource. It's a wonderful resource for looking at information and looking at the maps. So if those inventory forms are up to date and posted on that website, then that is a really great resource for planning, both local and for the regional planning agencies. And as the buildings age, those inventory forms can be updated and information can be added because that history just grows. It can also be the foundation for grant applications. And kind of going hand in hand with the planning and also just carrying forward that information. It can be something that can be used for having it organized for grant applications in advance of when a lot of times grant resources become available, and either local officials or local planners or regional planners we don't want to do this, but we often end up scrambling to pull information together. So if there's information that's pre-established and pre-written down, it's really helpful when those grant funds become available. As far as locally, like taking the initiative and doing them, it can be helpful as if you're preparing to engage a consultant, if there's information that's already kind of started to be pulled together as far as the inventory forms that can help with engaging a consultant later on. It can save you money with the consultant if the local history is already documented. I feel like it also shows that you have local support for those historic resources and protecting them or taking the next steps. It shows that like you really care about it because you want to write all that information down and get that documented. And another kind of a great way to document history, which can also be used not only for like National Register or for other grant applications, but that information can be used for developing like a local historic tour. I know that as I said, I had worked on the Millers Falls Historic Register nomination, and when I finished like compiling all this like extensive amount of information, the local historic commission was really thrilled with it, and they thought this would be the great information for us to use to create a local tour. And again, as I had already said, it becomes available through Mass Historic's website, and I think that just is a really great resource and a great way to have that information available. So hopefully I have convinced everyone that this is something that they want to do, and the next speakers will be taking us forward through kind of the other basics, the technical standards. Robin Fordham from Mass Historic is going to talk about those next. And then Shannon Walsh is going to talk about documentation resources. And finally, we're going to get some insights about using the local library. So I'm going to stop sharing and turn the screen over to Robin from Mass Historic.
Me unmute. Hi, everybody. See if I can share my screen here. This takes me a minute to figure out.
And while Robin is figuring that out, I'll just mention, if you do have any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat, and then we can answer questions at the end. I'm going to kind of keep track of those, and hopefully maybe Ted can help me with that. And when we get to the end, if there's questions in the chat, we can throw those out there.
Okay, great. Are you all seeing my cover slide there? I see a thumbs up from Stacia. Okay, great. Okay, so hi everyone. I'm Robin Fordham, Preservation Planner at the Massachusetts Historical Commission, and I'm here today to walk you through some basics for preparing a draft level MHC inventory form. I'm going to begin by clarifying a couple of technical terms, inventory and survey. Inventory refers to the whole of a community's documented historic resources that includes buildings, structures, objects, burying grounds, and parks and landscapes. MACRIS, which we spoke about just a moment ago, the Massachusetts Cultural Resource Information System, is the digitized repository of this inventory. A community's inventory status is determined by the number of resources that have been documented and inventoried, as well as how up to date those records are. In the graph that we see here, we can see that I'm going to move, I've got my, or maybe that's a little bit better. We can see that the town of Adams documented a substantial number of resources in the late 1970s, but very few resources have been documented and added to their inventory since that time. By contrast, this graph shows the town of Great Barrington with a more consistent process of inventory expansion and updating. It's important for communities to both expand their inventory by documenting additional resources as well as updating records, which no longer meet current standards. Survey refers to the organized approach of documenting resources that are not yet part of the inventory, as well as updating existing inventory forms, which are out of date and don't meet current standards. Surveys can be community-wide, limited to a specific neighborhood, or focused on a particular building type. While smaller communities often lack the funding to hire consultants for large-scale surveys, volunteers can work to create draft inventory forms as an important first step to survey update and expansion. To that end, I'm going to provide some basic instructions on completing an MHC Form B, which is used to document buildings. MHC uses 7 inventory forms for documenting historic resources. You can see them listed here. But the building form is by far the most common for historic resource survey, and many of the form fields are applicable to other inventory forms. And you can see here we have the link for where the blank forms are available on the web. I've started by highlighting the Form B you see here to distinguish between areas of information which are easier to obtain by a layperson, seen here highlighted in yellow, and information which requires more research but is still accessible, seen here in blue. I'll be moving from the easier to the more challenging fields. I won't be discussing 2 areas in particular, and that's setting and architectural description fields, as these areas are areas that require the most amount of technical expertise and are usually best addressed by consultants. The first major part of the Form B is the primary photograph. This photo will appear on the cover page, and if later incorporated into MACRIS, it will serve as the thumbnail picture on the MACRIS system. I will address the photo requirements a bit later in a separate section. There are a number of fields in the Form B that are very straightforward. They include the town and city, the street address, the present and original uses of the building. These may or may not change over time. A single family home may become a 3-family home. A school may become a condo complex, or a garage might be converted to a studio. This information is usually clear, but town property records can also help confirm current uses. The presence of outbuildings can usually be determined by site. Common examples here include sheds, barns, and detached garages. The building's exterior materials, such as the foundation, wall coverings and trim, and roofing material, can usually be determined visually. Town property cards are also a source for this information, along with the acreage of the lot. Oh, I'm getting someone's microphone on. If we could mute that.
If the computer for Stephen Litchfield could please mute.
He's making noise. Could you make noise? Are you okay to me?
They can.
I
There we go. Okay, great.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. All right, the building condition field. When recording the building condition, it's important to note that MHC recognizes 5 conditions for a building: excellent, good, fair, deteriorated, and ruins. Excellent is reserved for buildings that are in the same condition they were in when they were built, or sometimes an immaculate restoration. It's very rare and exceptional. Good is most common. However, it's important to note that if the building is sided with artificial siding, such as vinyl or aluminum, it can never be considered a better condition than fair. You'll record your name, the name of the organization for which you're compiling the information, which is most commonly the local historic commission, and the date and year that you compiled the information at the bottom of the first page of the form. Additional information required for the Form B can be obtained online through Macros Maps. Here, I'll walk you through the steps on how to obtain the assessor's number, U.S. quad map, Macros area if located within a Macros area, Macros ID number if the property's been previously surveyed, and a locus map, which will help identify the property's location, lot lines, building lines, and nearest cross streets. We'll begin by navigating to the Macros Maps site. The next step is to enter the street address of the property you're researching. This will bring up a link to the property. Here, we're going to click on the link to 15 Taylor Street in Amherst, Massachusetts. The resulting map shows the location of the subject property at the black marker. The colored dots and boxes and colored boxed in areas all represent resources inventoried within the Macros system. Here, I've zoomed into 15 Taylor Street to determine whether it is within a Macros area, the boxed shaded sections, and whether it has a Macros ID number, the form number field on the Form B. In this case, my property has not yet been inventoried and does not lie within an area, so I would leave those fields blank. In order to access the assessor's number, the U.S. quad map information, and create a locus map, we'll need to change some of the layers which control how information is displayed on the map. In the Layers tab, we'll turn off the MHC inventory layers and open the Overlay Layers section. And here we'll turn on the assessor's parcels with parcel numbers and the USGS quad grid. The resulting map, when zooming in, shows the subject property with its assessor's number. You can see there it's 11D-103, lot lines, and the original, and the US quad map, which is a little challenging to see here, but if you look just to the upper left of that black marker, you might see the words Mount Toby. It's a little bit easier to recognize when you're looking directly at Macros yourself. So in this case, the US quad map would be the Mount Toby map. So we can now use a screen capture here to create a locus map to be inserted on the cover page, which meets MHC requirements. The map shows the subject property, the lot lines, building outlines, and it's clearly labeled cross streets. On the next page of the Form B, the town and street address are entered in the page header, along with the Macros areas and form numbers where applicable. The bibliography section should list any works used to research the subject property. This may include historic maps, books, periodicals, manuscript collections, and additional miscellaneous materials. Items accessed online should include active links to the resources. MHC requests the use of Chicago style for footnotes and bibliographies. A figure section can be added to include historic photographs and other historic images, such as postcards, print images, or newspaper clippings. An additional photo section can be added for any contemporary photos, including alternate views of the property, outbuildings, and noteworthy architectural details. Next, we'll review the blue highlighted areas, most of which require more research and may be more challenging to complete. The place field simply refers to commonly known name for a neighborhood or village. Not all resources have a place name, so it's fine to leave this field blank. The historic name field requires research to determine the earliest known historical owner. This information is generally identified through historic maps and deeds for older properties. You should try to identify the spouse's name if the couple was married at the time of construction. If you can't confirm the ownership, you can leave the field blank. The date of construction can be challenging to pinpoint. Typical sources are maps and deeds, sometimes newspaper articles. Use circa for the date when the date is not exact. Be sure to identify your sources. Deeds should cite the book and page number. Maps should include the name and year. Visual assessment can be used by those with a strong knowledge of architectural history when other documentation is not available. For the style and form section, MHC has a list of standard styles and forms for reference. If lacking familiarity in this area, the field can be left blank. Architects and builders are harder to research and confirm, particularly for older buildings and dwellings. If they can be confirmed, include the source as a footnote in the historical narrative. When information suggests but can't confirm a builder or architect, use likely or possibly in this field and discuss in the historical narrative. If the architect or builder can't be identified, which is common, use unknown. Many alterations to the building may or may not be obvious upon visible inspection. Comparing historic maps can provide information on changes in building footprints. Bird's eye view maps are useful for their attention to architectural detail. More recent alterations may be available from town property records. Replacement windows are common and readily identifiable. Whenever possible, provide general dates of alterations. Documentation of more recent changes may be available from town property records. I think I said that already. Identifying that a particular building has been moved can be challenging. If research provides confirmation of a move, indicate that here and discuss the specifics in the historical narrative. If there's speculation but not confirmation, discuss in the historical narrative, but leave this area blank. And finally, the historical narrative. The purpose of the historical narrative is to provide a full history of the building's construction and ownership. It's important to include birth and death dates for owners, architects, and builders whenever possible. Use a question mark when not able to identify a birth or death year. Keep in mind that a historical narrative need not be extensive to be useful. A brief chronological narrative of ownership is sufficient for a draft form, which can be expanded upon at a later date. And a last note, if conducting deed research, a simple deed table like the example here is useful to include, though not required. When citing deeds within the historical narrative, always provide footnotes referencing the book and page numbers. Next, I'll provide a quick overview of photo requirements and some common problems to avoid. The primary photo should be a 3/4 view, seen here, which shows 2 elevations whenever possible. MHC requires a photo resolution of 1 megapixel minimum. To determine your image's photo resolution, open the File Properties and click on the Details tab, which shows the pixel dimensions by width and height. Multiplying the two will result in the total resolution. You're welcome to provide supplemental contemporary photos. These can include additional views, outbuildings, and noteworthy architectural details. Here are a few of the common problems to avoid when photographing historic resources. Try to avoid foliage blocking a full view of the building by photographing in the late fall to early spring. The image below, taken after the leaves have fallen, provides a much better view of the subject house than the image above with full foliage. If possible, aim to photograph when cars and trash cans aren't present. Vehicles in particular can block important details and draw the focus away from the historic structure. Avoid bright sunny days as they tend to cast strong shadows. Overcast days are best for this reason. And avoid photographing in the presence of snow as it obscures roofing materials and landscaping. Some best practices to keep in mind. Make sure to include lot lines and cross streets in your locus map. Use Chicago style for footnotes and bibliography. Provide complete citations, including page numbers. Identify all sources, including photographs and maps. Provide a complete bibliography. It's particularly useful for future researchers. Photograph on overcast days when leaves have fallen without snow. Include a deed table if possible. Make sure to proofread your draft. Here are links to blank inventory forms, macros and macros maps, which I'll also provide in the chat. Additionally available from MHC upon request are technical guidelines for electronic fields, an MHC survey, and the full Historic Properties Survey Manual. I have provided the technical guidelines and a PDF of these slides as a handout for this presentation. Hopefully, this review will be a helpful starting point for working on draft inventory forms for your community. Please feel free to reach out if you have any questions. I'll put my email in the chat. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Robin.
Just gotta figure out how to stop sharing.
I believe Stacia usually does emails, but I can since everyone had to pre-register, we can pull the email addresses and do a follow-up email if that's helpful to send out the resource document that was just mentioned. Okay, that'd be great. And so now we're going to move on to Shannon Walsh from the Pioneer Valley Planning Commission.
Yep. Thank you, Beth. And thank you, Robin. That was great information. You're going to hear me reinforcing or adding a little more information about some of the things that Robin just talked about. Okay, let me just move my, okay. Everybody see my screen okay? Yeah, okay. Alrighty. So hello, everyone. I'm going to talk about online resources available to start documentation of a historic building or property. And some of this information is technical in nature, but we wanted to provide you, as Beth explained, with an overview of the steps to find basic information on a property. I like the way Robin did it. It's mostly the yellow highlighted sections on the form that Robin used as an example is what we'll talk about. So my name is Shannon Walsh. I'm the Historic Preservation Planner for the Pioneer Valley Planning Commission. My background is in English, broadcast journalism, and historic preservation, which I feel essentially all relate to writing, research, and storytelling. And working on research and documentation are my favorite parts of my job here at PVPC. And if there's time, I can answer questions at the end of our meeting, or you can contact me directly with general questions about the presentation. And it sounds like we can also email the list of registrants the information, and I have all of my slides in PDF form. I also have links embedded in the slides, so you should be able to access some of the sites that I talk about. So for my agenda, I'm going to talk about our goal and objective for creating this meeting for you today. Primary versus secondary sources, the importance of getting organized, including gathering your information and formatting a strong bibliography, the basics of using an assessor database, deed research, and Macris as a resource. I will again emphasize, as Beth and Robin, Macris is a wonderful resource. Most states do not have something like this, so we're really lucky to have it. And I learned some things from Robin today. I didn't know some of the layers that you could access. We're also going to talk about additional resources available for research and the beginning of building a historical narrative, which was one of the blue highlighted sections Robin mentioned. So for my disclaimer, I'm sharing my general research approach as an example to hopefully give you ideas to get started, but there are many different paths to get the same information. Like Robin just showed through Macris, you can get some of the data that you need for your form, and I've often gone to other sites to get it as well. So our goal today is to support our Western Mass communities with planning for historic inventory updates. Our objective is to provide information to kickstart baseline documentation using accessible resources. And understand that when I say documentation, the end goal is to add or update information currently in Macris, and we want to meet current state technical documentation standards. We understand that most communities are interested in updating existing or adding new documentation, but it can be challenging to know where to start, and hiring a consultant can be costly. Once you've chosen the properties that you're going to research, we're hoping to provide you with this guidance and suggestions to develop that initial research, even if it's going to be handed off to a qualified volunteer or a paid consultant to finish the work. Beginning this baseline documentation for a property or properties could also be a good way to set up a future project to complete documentation, or even to use as information to support a grant application. And as Beth mentioned, this is also a Mass Historical Commission requirement that you have updated documentation if you're asking for a National Register determination, even if it's not for the property you're documenting. So with all historic documentation, appropriate source material is crucial to confirm that you're starting with accurate information. Per the Library of Congress, primary sources are the raw materials of history, original documents and objects that were created at the time under study. Examples include original manuscripts, periodical articles reporting original research or thought, diaries, memoirs, letters, journals, speeches, interviews, government documents and public records, eyewitness accounts, newspaper clippings, memoirs, maps, oral histories, and census data. Secondary sources are accounts that retell, analyze, or interpret events, usually at a distance of time or place. Examples include a review, critical analysis, second-person account, a more recent historical study, an encyclopedia, and a biography. The process begins with organizing the required information, much of which will fill in those blanks that Robin pointed out on the form. So I think it's helpful to understand what information you need to gather at the beginning of research, even if you don't have all the answers yet. As Robin mentioned, you can just leave some of these sections blank, but you know, or whoever takes this on will know that you fill them in as a next step. Whether you're focusing on one building or a list of buildings, it's helpful to organize the basic information that you now know needs to go on an inventory form. So the parcel information is identified by the local assessor's number. You'll need to know the property's acreage and if there's an existing MHC Macris number. The full street address is important to know. Does the building have a name of the earliest known owners? Which, again, with deed research, you might end up getting earlier than what is currently documented. Do you know when or roughly when it was constructed? And a note about that, it's not recommended to rely on the date that is in the assessor's database. This will have to be confirmed by primary sources like deed research, but I find it helpful to write in circa date and if it isn't a public record, and just note that it needs to be confirmed as you get deeper into research. Do you already know the architectural style or architect? If not, you can leave it blank. And I also add the most recent deed information so I know where to start with my research. The top example here on this slide is already documented in Macros, but let's say that inventory is going to be updated. Most of this information is already available and may just need to be confirmed. The bottom example is a library that has not been documented, so you can see some of the information is missing. Another thing I think is important to think about as you're organizing your sources and getting started is the bibliography. As Robin mentioned, the Chicago Manual of Style Format is required by the Mass Historical Commission for documenting sources all the way to National Register nominations. I find it useful to format the research this way up front for consistency. The Chicago Manual of Style online site's Citation Quick Guide is one place to find formatted examples for footnotes and bibliography. And you can use this site for free to a certain extent. To get deeper into it, you have to pay, but the Citation Quick Guide is available for no cost. Properly tracking and formatting your sources up front will save time down the road. This practice will lay the foundation for continued research, and documentation will be ready for next steps. And you could format it with primary sources and secondary sources with Chicago style for each bibliography. Now I'm going to give a brief overview of some of the sites where I find information to start research, including assessor's data, deed research, and Macros data. Property deed research is a good way to start documentation using primary sources to determine the earliest land and property owners. You can typically access the current property deed information through a municipal assessor's database. You can also get this information through the Mass GIS interactive map, but if you use a municipal database, you can sometimes see references to older deeds, so you don't have to start at the most recent deed. Once you have deed book and page information, you can go to the online site for the County Registry of Deeds. If you find references, you may also be able to access related land plans through the Registry of Deeds. Once you've confirmed the book and page number where you want to start, go to the County Registry of Deeds website to research the property chain of title in reverse chronological order. Choose the option to search by book and page number, and once you open that document, scroll down to look for the book, page number, date, and names from the previous sale. Continue with a new search for the earlier book and page number following the same steps. Keep going until the data stops. Sometimes you'll get a message that says property not indexed and you will hit a wall. You can also try to search by address, name, etc. I have honestly never gone to a registry of deeds in person in the 10 years that I've been doing this, but they may be able to help you get further if you can't get to the previous owner information through the deed. Sometimes I also research abutting properties because they will list owners and I can cross-reference that way. As you're working on deed research, as Robin mentioned, a deed table, document the process. Keep notes on the book, page, names, and years as you go through the chain of title. It can get confusing, especially if larger properties were subdivided. You can also go back to that information later if needed. The information can be helpful for cross-referencing, and knowing owners over time can confirm findings if you're checking against historic maps, census reports, and other primary sources. So as has already been discussed, the MHC's Macros database and Macros maps are great resources to consult early on in your research process, even if there hasn't been documentation on the property that you're researching. I use Macros maps most often because, as Robin showed, you can quickly look up a property by the address, and it provides a visual of other properties documented in the area of focus. If there was earlier documentation, including on nearby properties, you can cross-reference that information with what you're finding for the property that you're researching. Macros also has great examples of more recent inventory forms so that you can see the MHC's current documentation standards. When cross-referenced with deed research to confirm findings, earlier inventory forms can be a good resource. This example from Ware was completed in 1983. It shows you what the building looked like at that time, so you can compare if there have been alterations since then. There is information in the architectural and historical sections which may be useful. And the bibliography references specific maps and a mid-20th century town history, which is a secondary source but could provide a historical overview of the area and should also have a list of primary sources that you can go to for your research. To recap, here are the resources I typically use to start documentation. Macros and Macros maps, the MassGIS interactive map, which should provide the most recent deed information, the local property assessor's number, a visual of the parcel borders, acreage, and the year built, which again needs to be confirmed by research. The local municipal assessor's online database will also provide deed information, the assessor's property number, acreage, and an estimated year built, but may have additional information including a record of permits for building alterations and older recorded deed information. The applicable county registry of deeds is where you can work on your deed research, searching the chain of title, but you can also go to this accessing the county you need online directly, or you can go to the Massachusetts Land Records page for links to all state registries. I also use Google Street View to visit a building or street without going to the site. So that can't be used for the actual photograph of the inventory form, but if you're doing preliminary research, as long as the Google car drove down that street, you can just type a street address into Google, and if the map comes up with a street view photo in the lower left-hand corner, you can select it and it can bring you there virtually. And it also gives you an opportunity to turn around virtually and look at other buildings onto the street to determine if there's other properties from constructed around the same time period. Sometimes there are also photos from previous years in Google Street View, so you can compare alterations over time. If you're working on taking research further than confirming basic property information and earliest owners, so the blue section of Robin's form example, here are some of my most used additional resources that are currently free and accessible online to find primary and secondary sources. Archive.org has a large collection of digitized scans of primary source publications. You may have to register, but there's currently no membership cost. The Library of Congress archives has historic maps and other resources. And Find a Grave can be useful for cross-referencing marker records and photos with names to narrow down birth and death dates and confirm family members. The Mass Real Estate Digitization Project and David Ramsey Map Collection have a large amount of scanned maps and atlases, and the earlier maps have property owners listed next to the buildings. So it's a great resource for cross-referencing with your deed research. Online municipal archives may have scans of city or town reports and other municipal records, and your local historical society's online or archival collection may be relevant to include providing access to historic photos, which you could request permission to use for the documentation. And of course, your librarian may have resource suggestions, and your library's local history section could have hard copies of primary sources and possible access to online resources that the library has a subscription for. To wrap this up, I'm going to briefly discuss the Building a Historical Narrative section that was one of the blue sections in Robin's example. Once you have confirmed the earliest property owners or residents using primary sources, you can begin to research their history. Primary sources include census reports, voting registrations, city or town directories, marriage, birth, death certificates, obituaries, which can be incredibly helpful, advertisements, building reports, and military records. My favorite primary source sites for this step are Ancestry.com, genealogybank.com, and newspapers.com. These sites all require a subscription. These two inventory form excerpts are examples of putting all of the documentation to try and provide concise context related to the resource that you are describing. The top example relates to two Vietnam veterans killed in action who are memorialized on a marker. The bottom is about a man whose business was connected to a 19th century building. This is the end of my presentation. Happy researching, and feel free to contact me if you have questions.
Thank you, Shannon. That was wonderful. Again, we will, I think these presentations have a lot of really great resources. So we will definitely look to emailing them out as PDFs to the group. I know that all of the information, the presentations, Preservation Massachusetts has been kind of logging them and including them on their website also. So that's another way that we will make the presentations available after the meeting. But thank you so much, Shannon. That was great. Our next presenter is from the Greenfield Public Library, Anna Bognolo. And Anna, are you okay running your own presentation from your computer?
I think so. Yeah.
Okay, great. Because I do have it queued up. If there's any
Yeah.
problem,
Yeah.
I can do that.
Let me share my screen. Let me see. Chrome tab. Let's see if this works. Does that work? Does everyone see the presentation?
I think it's coming. Let's see.
Okay.
Yep, there we go.
Yeah?
Yes.
Fantastic. Great. So let me just go to come on, let's go. Sorry. My computer's lagging a little bit. Good morning, everyone. My name is Anna Bognolo, and I think there we go. And as Beth mentioned, I am the director of the Greenfield Public Library in Greenfield, Massachusetts. My background is in library science, but prior to becoming a librarian, I also worked and have degrees in art history and museum studies and conservation, preservation. Prior to becoming the director of the Greenfield Library, I was a school librarian and an academic librarian, and in both of those positions, I also held the title of archivist. I would not say that I am the best archivist, but I certainly have had lots of training in preservation management. So the fact that the Greenfield Public Library and many libraries, public libraries has a local history room is helpful. And in fact, at this moment in time, I have received a CPC grant for some work in the local history room of organizing it and also doing some restoration work on some unique items in our print collection. I am working with a local consultant archivist as well as a Simmons student in the library science program who's doing an archival class at the moment who needs to do an internship. So it's a fantastic win-win for all of us. Wonderful funding through the CPC, and then lots of local talent that we can tap into. So Ted invited me to speak today, and thank you, Ted, for that. And I'm going to be speaking about library resources for local history and genealogy. I took the perspective of kind of a member of the public coming into the library in search of information, local history, or genealogy. So it's kind of a basic presentation. The former two presenters have such wonderful information, very detailed, and I'm very excited to have access to those slides for those folks who come into the library wanting some more in-depth information, particularly on housing and historic housing. So I'm just going to get started here. Let's see. So I'm sure many of you have a local public library that you have visited often or on a few occasions. And not all public libraries have local history collections, but many of them do. It really depends on the size of the library and what the collection practice has been over time. And so many of them do maintain some sort of a local history collection. Many libraries do not have, particularly the smaller libraries and rural libraries, a dedicated archivist or special collections librarian. And so it really becomes something that staff will oversee, but perhaps not have an in-depth knowledge of how local history collections work. But some of the items you might find in your local public library's local history collection will be town histories and vital records, city directories and yearbooks for local public schools, historic maps and atlases, newspapers in print or on microfilm or another digital format, photographs, postcards, ephemera, cemetery records and church histories, local author work and community publications, manuscript collections, local government reports and minutes, and oral histories. I think what's really important to remember is that the availability varies by town, so it's worth checking both your home library and neighboring community libraries. Some libraries have dedicated local history spaces or rooms. I'm very fortunate that in the development of the new Greenfield Public Library, they did actually create a room for the local history collection, which is turning out to be a real asset. And other libraries may just have materials available on shelves in a particular area of the library. So it's definitely worth asking a library staff member to direct you to where that collection might be if it's not obvious. So online genealogy resources are a little more complicated. I think Shannon alluded to the fact that many of them are subscription based and they tend to be incredibly expensive. So your smaller public libraries may not have access or may have very limited access maybe to one of these services. So again, it's really worth checking a library catalog within your region to see who may have access, or even the library website, and I'll go through that in a moment, to see who might have access to any one of these genealogical resources that are online. There are a few details here. I'm sure many of you are familiar with these sites, but I've included some more in-depth information about what type of information they offer and also who may have access or how you would access the database. For example, there are some, we have Family Search at the Greenfield Public Library. That is free to us because we are an affiliate with the organization, which means that if you want to access Family Search, you can only do that by coming into the library. It's also important to know that your public libraries are available to everyone, whether or not you live in that town. So you are able to go and visit one of those libraries and use the resources on their computers within the library. But definitely make sure you call ahead to make sure that they still have that subscription and also to note the hours of availability. Online and other genealogical resources that are provided through some libraries, they may offer this. Fold 3, we get regular requests for that. American Ancestors. The Digital Commonwealth is a fantastic resource. It is available to anyone as long as you have a computer and access to the internet. The Library of Congress is similar. I believe Shannon mentioned that as well. National Archives also, these are available to members of the public, either if you're in the library or if you're at home. And then there are many other local digital archives created by individual libraries or historical societies. I use UMass as an example, or the PVMA. And then also check to see if your local library offers local history or genealogy talks or one-on-one appointments with folks who are trained in using those online resources or even accessing the print resources in the local history room. There are a number of libraries that will have local history days where they have people who are available to help with researching. Notable libraries in Central Western Massachusetts. These are members of the CW Mars network, if you're familiar with that. All of these libraries have a local history collection and access to genealogy resources. Again, they all vary to the extent and to the kind of care of the collection. Depends also on if it's an active collection that the library is continuing to grow, or if it's a historic collection that is for consultation but not necessarily growing. And so you'll see here, of course, the Greenfield Public Library, Montague Public Library, Sunderland, Jones Library, Forbes Library, Holyoke Public Library, Springfield City Library, Westfield Athenaeum. I've covered myself up here. So the Berkshire Athenaeum, Stockbridge Library, Museum and Archives, Lenox Library. And I always like to include the Boston Public Library because the Boston Public Library is available online and in person to anyone who is a resident of Massachusetts. If you're interested in accessing their online resources, and they have quite a lot of resources available, you can apply online through their website for an e-card, which takes maybe under 5 minutes, and that gives you access to a wealth of online resources. So as long as you're a resident in Massachusetts, you have access to the Boston Public Library, and they, as the Library of the Commonwealth, are available to all of us, and they have more money than many of us small libraries, so access to a wider variety of resources. Other organizations that are local that will provide local history and genealogy. I just included a few of them. I'm obviously speaking more from my Greenfield CW Mars network, but we have the Pecumtuck Valley Memorial Association and Historic Deerfield. They have 2 libraries, which they call the Memorial Libraries, with a plethora of information. And then we also have, sorry, I'm just trying to move my little screen here because I can't see my own presentation. The Springfield Museums as well have the Springfield History Library and Archives. And then finally, we have the Berkshire Historical Society with the Margaret Hall Library and Archives as well as for resources. Not to disregard, many small towns have a historical society, so definitely look there. Those tend to be volunteer-led with limited hours, but they offer not only access to documents, but also to lecture series and wonderful resources as well for anyone who's looking to do some local history research. So here are how you might, if you're going to the library, these are some tips that I offer ahead of time before you go so that you can make sure that you have a successful research time at the library. Definitely check your library's website for what's available online and in person. I have here a screenshot of our home page at the Greenfield Public Library, and you will see there's a little tab over here that says online resources. If you click on that and search for local history, you will find what we have to offer in terms of our online resources and how they need to be accessed, whether you can access them from home or from the library. Also, other libraries will use different titles, so you could look under digital resources. As I said, we use online resources, local history, or genealogy. Call ahead or email the library that you want to visit. Again, remember, libraries in your region will offer different resources, whether in print or online, so definitely call and find out what they offer. Let them know that you're interested in visiting the library. Some libraries require appointments depending on the availability of the collection or items that you wish to access. Bring as many details as you have when you go. It's really hard, particularly in smaller libraries where there isn't a dedicated staff member, to spend a lot of time going through documents if you come unprepared. We tend to be wearing many hats at one time. And there are some staff members who are better versed in our local history collections and online resources than others. So making sure that you know what you need to look for is really helpful for all of us. If you just happen to be at a library, definitely speak to the reference librarian or reference librarians to see how they can help you. And again, check all of the libraries in your region to see who has access to what you need. Again, don't forget the Boston Public Library is available to you. Okay. And I think that wraps up my presentation. I got to that really quickly. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have. Here I am.
Thank you, Anna. That was wonderful. It's always nice to hear. I know the library is has so many resources. It's just great to hear you encouraging folks to come in, because I know sometimes it's like a little bit overwhelming, like you don't know where to get started with it. I'm just going to take a quick look through the chat. I know there were a few comments and questions about like follow up with providing the resources. So we will definitely, I wrote myself a note, we'll definitely go back and try to provide like any website links and the presentations themselves as PDFs, because they have a lot of resources embedded into them. So let's see. I'll just start off with, there was a question specifically for Shannon. Shannon, I'm from Adams. As you have shown, our inventory was done in the 1970s. Do we resubmit new paper copies of Form B, or can this be done online by uploading them? That's a really great question.
That's
I think
actually
that was a Robin
Robin
question.
Yep. Yep. So the answer to that is that once a Form B has been fully drafted and is ready for review, you would submit it to MHC, and then we would do a review here. And once it's considered sufficiently complete and up to date, we would be responsible for uploading it. So that I hope that answers that question.
Great, thank you. Let's see. I'm from Irving Historic Commission. We just completed a survey with the consultant and are preparing the final report for MHC. Okay, that was just a general comment. I think quickly, is the Greenfield Public Library collection digitized? Who did the digitalization?
Sadly, no. We have the Greenfield recorder on microfilm from the first print paper through 2018. And that is the extent of digitization. I misspoke. The yearbooks, many of the yearbooks from Greenfield Public School, high school, have been digitized and are available in the Internet Archive. Otherwise, funding is a huge issue, as I'm sure everyone appreciates. And while we would love to digitize, we're not at that stage at this time, sadly, but maybe in the future.
Yes, that would be great. There's a comment, Library Congress Maps Division has bird's eye view maps and Sanborn maps and more for free. That's great to know. I know those maps are a really wonderful resource for like past, businesses and tracking down, and I know they're really cool.
Mhm.
Let's see.
And I'm just going to jump in as you're looking.
Yeah.
I'm going to add the Boston Public Library and Digital Commonwealth to my slides, and I'll resend a new PDF before we send it out. there are a lot of communities that have more, like Springfield has this amazing Works Progress Administration database that has photos from the 30s. So Great Barrington Historical Society, I know, has a lot of photos from the region. So it is that each community could compile their own list to help current and future researchers moving forward of knowing where to go. The only thing I wanted to throw in a comment about, which Robin could expand upon, you can always reach out to Mass Historic if you have questions about inventory, and they can, kind of tell you what they're looking for when you submit. Because if you feel that you can get the entire form completed on your own or using volunteers, there are some more technical things of actually mailing it in and a printed photo and disc and things like that. But if you're the goal is to get to National Register listing, that will definitely involve a conversation with Mass Historic, because the National Register director may have to weigh in to tell you if you can even, if that's the next step or if that's like 4 steps down the road. So I don't know if you have anything else to add about that. That would be a whole different presentation, but just wanted to throw that out there. This is intended to really get you started or help you move forward or help you prepare for 1 or 2 buildings or a bigger project.
Yep. Yeah, the one thing I would add that I think I forgot to put in my slides was that when you're taking those photographs, to make sure to keep digital copies of the photographs because they are actually submitted separate from the form. You'll insert the photograph into that cover page, but we also use the photograph separately as our thumbnail, and it has to be very high definition. We can't extract it from the Word form. So the other thing I was going to add was that unfortunately the link is broken, so I can't put it up there right now. But there's I'm going to get the name wrong. It's the mass building inspection plans as a digitized site at Mass Archives that has digitize the card records for civic and public buildings, so things like schools and churches. And that's a good resource for not for individual dwellings, but for those types of buildings to look for basic information on architects. And sometimes there'll be plans you'd have to make an appointment to come in and photograph, but the cards themselves will provide information on architects, builders, and even, successions of additions will also have plans, and you can see changes in time there. So, but I can't give you the link right now because it's broken. But if you search Mass Archives inspection plans, you'll get to the site.
I forgot about that. I'm going to add that to my slide too.
Okay.
And that's
Yeah,
really,
that's
it's
great.
really just for it's typically municipal buildings
Yes, right.
or public buildings, but
Yep.
you can actually find the submitted plans. So it's an amazing resource, especially if there's a proposed rehabilitation project and you really want to know. It's good for tax credit projects, for example.
Yep.
There were a few other sources noted in the chat. Google Books is very useful and free. Familysearch.org is free. You have to create an account. And they include census and vital records and others. Let's see, those were noted.
And I've used Google Books before. If I find something on Google Books, I try to find it on archive.org because the Google Books for the bibliography, the web address is like this long. And I've had Mass Historic tell me before, try to find a different site like archive.org. So, but it is a source. So I usually start with that.
All right, let's see if there's some final, let's see, comment. If the Historical Commission is not looking to nominate a building, at least not right away, how do you suggest going about starting an inventory of a commission's collection?
So I'm not quite sure what's meant by starting an inventory of a commission's collection, but what we were reviewing here with building forms would be that first piece for collecting information on historic resources throughout the town. Form Bs are the baseline for if the question is sort of talking about potentially moving to nominating a building, every and our nomination requires a complete and updated Form B. So hopefully that answers that question.
There's another question here. That's a good question. Are the same type of inventory forms required for building contents / collections when nominating a building for the National Register?
And again, I'm not quite sure what the asker is meaning when they say to building contents collections. But there is when nominating a building for National Register, that would be a National Register nomination form, which is a different process, or next step down the line. You would start with the Form B. And that would have to be complete and up to date. And then, as Shannon mentioned, it's a whole other process for contacting MHC to see about nominating something for the register.
And there was a clarification in the notes here. Collections meaning books, documents, etc. a commission has in its collection. But I'm thinking that those would not be, I mean, I'm going to defer, but what because I think Robin or Shannon would be better to answer, but
Yeah.
I think that those would not be the Mass Historic forms are just for the actual building itself.
Right,
Not-
right. Or that list in my slide, buildings, bridges, structures,
Mhm.
objects, but not museum-like objects, objects in the built environment.
I think that I've caught up. Let's see. Just taking a quick look, but I think I'm caught up with the questions. Are there any final questions? Otherwise, this has been really, really, I mean, I think this is fabulous. There's a lot of great information. So, and I know everyone, I mean, I'm going to look back at these presentations because they'll be like really good resources for research. Just as kind of a final note, the way that that our group works is we often look back and try to come up with topics based on like any input that we get from folks. So feel free to, I'm going to type my email address in the chat as well. I know Shannon had put hers in, and if you think of a topic that your local historic commission or historic society is really interested in and would make for a good meeting in the future, please email us, one of us, any of us, because we often look back and try to come up with topics based on like questions that have come up or things that we hear that folks are interested in. So I'll leave that last little homework for the group.
And visit the Preservation Mass YouTube channel for the Western Mass Historical Commission Coalition, WMHCC. We have meeting recordings going back, I'm going to say 5 years. We used to meet in person, but we've found we started meeting virtually. We met all through COVID, and then we realized that it was actually easier for people to meet virtually. So we've continued, but there's a great resource of past videos with different topics. And yes, as Beth said, please let us know what you want us to talk about. We'll get good speakers and it'll be great.
I'm just jotting down. I've gotten a couple suggestions, which are excellent. So I'm just writing those down. And thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you for
Thank you.
coming.
Thanks.